Good day, eh? Welcome to another Mr. Kilroy presentation on behalf of the Freedom Pages. Today is the subject of law and order. The following is excerpts from a transcript from the book The Passionate Politics of Shaughnessy Cohen by Susan Delacourt. It takes you behind closed doors of Parliament. It tells the story of the birth of Bill C-68. More importantly, it demonstrates how divisive the issue is and was within the Liberal Party itself. What lengths Cohen and Rock went to silence opposition to the bill. Fasten your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen. This proves to be a long one. This should be further proof that gun control is a feminist-driven policy. It has absolutely nothing to do with public safety, as it has long been packaged and sold to us ad nauseum. And the reason I say this is that just because it's a women's issue or becomes or something is feminist driven does not mean you can stand up against it. In fact, feminists regularly bring up topics that are not based in fact. Like right now, the current one is rape culture. Think about this a moment. Nothing is further from the truth that we live in a society that condones rape in any form. But on to the birth of gun control or the birth of Bill 68. The May weekend that thousands of Liberals had assembled for the party's first post-election convention. They basked in their opportunity in the decade to hold a policy convention as the governing federal party. Though the mood of the gathering was triumphal, there were plenty of questions hanging in the air. What was the party supposed to do with its regained hold on the nation? Liberals, elected and otherwise, appeared to have resigned themselves to the cost-cutting government. The trick was to find ways to be liberal without spending money. Right off the top, they're euchred. A liberal cannot do anything without spending money. One possible answer landed on the floor of the convention thanks to some high-level maneuvering by backroom strategists and by the women's contingent within the party. Again, there's this undeniable link again. Labeled Resolution Number 14, it was a 6-point plan to severely limit gun ownership in Canada, and it was put before the delegates by the National Liberal Women's Commission, an arm of the party designed to ensure female representation in the ranks and in policy decisions. The gun control resolution called for increased penalties on the criminal use of firearms and their illegal importation, a ban on private ownership of military assault weapons, strict controls over ammunition sales and handgun ownership, and most significant, a national system of gun registration. No one missed the symbolic importance of the resolution of its sponsor. Gun control was being flagged as a bona fide women's issue for the Chrétien government. Women voters were crucial to the Liberal Party in sheer numbers and motivation to vote. They were a powerful group. Moreover, women were not by and large reform voters. A strong gun control policy would seal the gender advantage that the Liberals enjoyed. At the same time, they could steal some of the reform's thunder as the party of law and order. Canadians appeared to be in the mood to get tough on crime. Prime Minister Jean Chrétien took resolution number 14 and ran with it at the convention's close. Though talk is easy, Gretchen said to loud applause from more than 2,000 liberals in the room. What Canadians want and what we must provide is tough action. There shouldn't be any more weapons in our streets or in our playgrounds. In our playgrounds. Now that's a good one. Like, I mean, seriously, how many little kids run around shooting up the parks? It's a ridiculous notion. He said that he wanted gun control legislation introduced in the Commons by the fall. Chrétien knew it would be a hard sell. Though this government needed a white knight or two to carry gun control to the Canadian people. The duty fell to Justice Minister Alan Rock, the idealistic novice who was quickly emerging as one of the stars of the Chrétien cabinet. A former corporate litigator, he was earnest, young, and attractive, especially to women voters. Central casting couldn't have produced a finer champion for gun control, and he appreciated the political dividends of good timing. It is a very difficult time for all of us because we are faced with ruinous financial situations, Rock said. We had to make some tough choices, but in the justice field, there were things we'd undertaken in the Red Book that we could follow through on because they didn't depend on economic circumstances. Oh, Rock, how wrong could you be? $2 billion to set that up. And you lied to us and said there would only be a few million. There were issues of principle, or they were social policies that weren't costly in the economic sense, but were important from the point of view of a liberal philosophy. Now, please don't be confused. We're not talking about a classic liberal philosophy. We're talking about progressive liberal philosophy. In other words, individual rights and freedoms always must be subsumed to the collective. The other benefit of this justice focus, said pollster Michael Mazzolini, was that it allowed the party to put Alan Rock, an asset to be exploited, in the window. Rock didn't need to be conscripted to the anti-gun crusade. He was adamantly opposed to gun ownership. If allowed his own way, he would have taken guns out of the hands of all citizens except police officers and military personnel. At the very least, he liked the idea of removing guns from all urban areas. He had the party's backing for the notion sorry, my mistake. First rural MPs had pleaded with Chrétien in early 1993 to downplay gun control in the Red Book. The Mazzolini found in pre-election focus groups that despite their fondness for gun control, women voters shared with men voters the fixation on employment issues. What has this got to do with jobs? Women asked Mazzolini's pollsters when they were showed the gun control proposal. After the election, Rock had been pulled aside by MPs such as Derek Lee, who, although they represented urban areas, advocated a go-slow, incremental approach to gun control. There were even senior civil servants that quickly and point-blankly told Rock not to kick that dog because it was sleeping quietly behind the stove. But in spring of 1994, the pressure for anti-gun legislation was mounting, especially after a high-profile shooting death in Toronto. The killing of 23-year-old Georgina Lamonis at the Just Desserts Cafe. Shortly after the convention, a Toronto police constable, Todd Bayless, was shot dead, incidentally by two women. The 1989 tragedy at L'École Polytechnique in Montreal, where Marc Lépine, better known to everyone as Camille Garby, shot and killed 14 women before turning his firearm on himself. These remain fixed in the public's memory. Bob Nolt, a no-nonsense kind of liberal from the Ontario riding of Kenora-Rainy River, which is in our far north, was serving his second term. Not yet 40 years old, he saw himself as just a regular guy from the part of the country where, as he said, guns are part of the furniture. He fervently hopes that the Liberals would leave gun control alone, but he knew he was up against formidable opposition. Eddie Goldberg, the Prime Minister's right-hand man since the 1970s, had proved impervious to Nolt's pleas. In the midst of the 1993 campaign, when Nolt was unpleasantly surprised to see a press release issued on the Liberals' anti-gun position, even after he and others had managed to keep the stricter measures out of the Red Book. He placed an angry telephone call to Goldenberg, and by way of reply, Nolt simply received the facts, a poll showing that most Canadians were in favor of strong controls on guns. I knew then it was going to happen, that it was part of the agenda, Nolt said. We all know who makes decisions around here. I am going to pause here, and this will be the end of part 1. I'll pick up the remainder of this presentation in part 2.